is inflation, and is it really something we should fear? Now, the short answer is we should fear runaway inflation, but we all love when our paychecks inflate, and we all love when the value of our homes inflating. Listen, we love to hear that our comic book collection is worth a lot more. Now, there are two schools of thought. The Keynesian school, which puts it this way, they say it's too much money chasing too few goods. Well, obviously, we ain't there yet. In fact, the velocity of money has been in perpetual free fall. Of course, now some would say it's hard to get any velocity of money when so much has been added to the economy, which brings me to the monetarist view of inflation, which is an oversupply of money into an economy. The Fed turned on the printing press to combat the Great Recession, resulting in its balance sheet ballooning from $900 billion in the summer of 2008 to $4.4 trillion today. So they saved the banks, but not only did we not get inflation, you didn't even get a lousy T-shirt, and well, just try getting a bank loan. So let's talk about the forward-looking aspects of everything. The market, we know, is a forward-looking man.
The inflation cat is out of the bag. So they've been shrieking for the past few days. Now, the latest US government numbers showing inflation just about where the Fed wants it at 2%. Doesn't matter which measure you take, headline, core, PCE, they're all around 2%. But now we get into really sophisticated arguments about whether or not you can allow inflation to rise above it for a period of time because it was below for so long. Or how far and how fast should you raise interest rates to accommodate inflationary expectations? My advice is don't get hung up on all of this. At the end of the day, the inflation rate on the Fed funds is just 1.5%. Now, even if there are 4 rate rises in 2018, you're still only looking at 2.5% for Fed funds, still low by historical standards. And the Fed has said again and again and again that the rate cycle will probably top out lower than at any time in recent history.
And the reality is that what we were comparing there, we'll say a decline in retail sales, is seasonally adjusted sales in January, seasonally adjusted in December. And I promise you the seasonal adjustment is more than the difference they're talking about. If you look at year-over-year sales from last January to this January, they were actually up. And beyond that, it's a very sort of messy time of the year. It's a little bit like thinking about the preseason of football or practice squad compared to real retail.
Some of the retail sales is gasoline, right? I mean, that's included in the federal numbers, and gasoline prices are higher today than they were a year ago. And now there is talk possibly of a 25-cent a gallon federal hike to the federal gasoline tax. It doesn't take much of a genius for me to think that that comes right out of the pockets of people who would be otherwise spending money at stores. Is that something that retailers would worry about, number one? And what the government giveth with one hand in the form of a tax cut, they may be taking away with the other in the form of a gas tax hike.
Hello there. Welcome to another RTD Live Talk. That was kind of a long introduction, but yet, the subject matter is going to be inflation. And so looking forward to having a good conversation tonight since I've been away for a while. So hoping to get some people to call in and share their thoughts on inflation as well as whatever other matters are on your mind. So as always, I want to start off by just checking in and seeing who's joining us. And so we got Tom. Hi there, Tom. How you doing, buddy? And so tonight, want to have the phone lines available so people can call in. There's a lot of things going on. We had the recent 2-year budget that's been put in place for $1 trillion, which is what we're told. But of course, that doesn't add up at all since they're going to be giving us some tax cuts or whatnot. So that's going to be an increased deficit in and of itself. So that means that there's going to be maybe $1.5 trillion or more per year at the end of the day. So we'll see how that plays out. But hi there, we have Joshua online, Daniel. I'll save in the day by day. So anyway, so subject matter is inflation. So I want to get an idea of kind of what's happening out in the main street. We know that Wall Street is doing very well. We know that the stock market is fluctuating a little bit, but yet, there are so many people that's very confident that it's going to continue to increase despite all of the other little chit chatter happening around the world. So looking to, hear from you guys. So as always, let me know either via chat or if you guys want to call in and share your thoughts, either way, we can, make something happen today. So that being the case, I also want to talk about my recent trip to Cuba, in which I had a great chance to really get an idea or get a feel for what it's like to be in a country where the government rules and oversees everything that's done. And so I have another video coming out that I'm actually going to work on probably tomorrow, but it has to do with telecommunications in Cuba. And so you guys are, if you haven't been there before, you'll be quite shocked as to how the day-to-day action or that day-to-day lifestyle in regards to internet, as well as just your television, things like that, just things they don't have access to, things that we have at our fingertips at unbelievable high speeds. They themselves don't really have access to that. So tomorrow I'll get into more things there. So Tom, it says, I bet Cuba was an eye-opening experience. It is, but this is my second time going, and so I'm kind of familiar with it now, and I really enjoy being there because it's third world, definitely. The standard of living is very poor, so everywhere you look, your eyes will see things that you will just probably be amazed at if you're not used to or familiar with third world living. But yet the living standards there are very humbling because you're forced to do without some things there that we take for granted here. So definitely, but it's great. I would recommend, if you have a chance to go, it's reasonably affordable to go down there and get a sense of what life is like in a country where the government runs everything. I mean, there's not a single thing in that country that their government doesn't have a hand on. And so it kind of, paints a picture of where the United States of America may be heading with all the invasive things that they've implemented to kind of monitor and keep track and keep tabs on its citizens. And so as we draw towards the end of all this monetary confusion, a lot of governments are going to really clamp down even more so that they can always have ways of, draining their population, or more so just, milking the cash cow, which are the tax-paying citizens. So it's definitely, something very similar to what's happening here, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. But if you guys want, we can talk about that. I'd love to share more on that. It says chat won't let me upload the link, but I highly recommend you look into it. Not sure what that is. Bold like a leopard. Welcome back. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Cuba been like that for a long time. Can't imagine. Ace One, definitely. I mean, that's all they know. And to really touch home on it, the country is so their mindset is so ingrained in socialism, and the fact that the government provides everything. Like, they get subsidized pretty much for everything you can imagine. But yet their medicine is to my knowledge of what I've heard, and it's top notch. And so you'll be surprised that even though it's a third world country, their medicine is fairly good, to the point where, if you travel outside of the Havana area, there's actually massive reports that they have cures for cancer. And so when I was there last year, I had a chance to meet some people who were there getting treatment, and people who had testimonies, the fact that, they had received a cure, and it wasn't the way we do it here, put it like that. And so it's quite interesting. Alan Bell, how is the wealth gap there? The wealth gap there it's pretty obvious. And so you have different provinces in the Havana area. And so closer to the coastline, towards away from Old Havana, the houses are a little bit bigger. You have more hotel chains and whatnot along the water. And so just when you drive through the neighborhood, they're cleaner. And so that's just pure signs that people there have a little bit more than people on the other side of town. And so the closer you are towards what they consider downtown, or the main capital area, which is Old Havana, you'll walk through some of the neighborhoods, and the things you see will just, completely blow your mind, because you can imagine what probably was, 40, 50 years ago, unbelievable architecture is now just crumbling. I mean, so you have people with, no window. Of course, they don't have windows, they have shutters there. So most of the houses have shutter, but no little blades on the shutters. You have kids hanging out windows, and kids with no shoes on, and trash all on the corners. And so the streets are very narrow. So there's areas where if you look straight down the street, you'll see just people huddled and just gathered along these little narrow pathways, but they're actually houses. And so, for me personally, even though it's safe as you can imagine there, just the idea of going down there, but it looks like about a half a mile long. It just doesn't look like, it's something that you want to be a part of. But Alan Bell, sounds like Detroit. Yes, in some ways, but yet, you know, people in Detroit at the end of the day, you know, if you have, you know, if you're getting, you know, some type of, you know, 500, 600, 800, 1,000 a month, somehow, however you get it, you're doing better than they're doing there. Because as you saw from the video I did earlier with Mylene, the young lady I stayed with, they have, you know, the retirement system there is unbelievable. Like, so as she mentioned, you get 8 coups or 8 CUC. So there's 2 different currencies for those that don't know. There's a CUC and the CUP, and the CUC is more tourist based and the CUP is for local. So when she mentioned that you get 8 to 10 CUCs for retirement, what she's actually saying is that when you convert that over to CUPs, which is what the local population use, it's usually 1 CUC for 25 CUPs. So that's the equivalent of, say, 200 CUPs, which could be the equivalent of, say, $200. So just that number, 8 CUCs. Someone asked a question, and they have somebody asked a question about what is a CUC. So a CUC is the tourist currency, and a CUP is a local currency, but you can do both, and locals do both as well, but they do more so CUPs. So everything you do, you know, every time you go to a store or a restaurant, you have 2 prices. You have the CUP for locals, and then right below that CUC. So for example, like I love seafood. So we went, every time I get a chance, I go eat seafood. And so my meal would come up to, like, say 500 CUPs, but when I converted to my tourist CUCs, it was like, you know, $10, $11 at the most for a full-fledged feast. So question from Tom Manley, do they have electricity 24/7? Yeah, every area I was in had electricity, and there was no problems there. I think outside this, outside Havana, there's a little small cities that don't have electricity that runs all night. And hey, they are suppressing technology. Yes, definitely. I was quite shocked when I heard that they had a cure for cancer down there, and a lot of people who have resources and are aware of it actually go there for treatment. Is there anything that appeared to be booming from a business perspective in the areas you visited? Because the government has their hands on everything, there's not much opportunity for foreigners just yet, unless you probably have, you know, some long and strong money. And so what I was told, that if you want to do business there, you have to go through the government. And of course, if you're favorable to them, they'll be favorable to you as far as, you know, extending you some opportunities to set up shop there. But just from a general entrepreneurial standpoint, not much real opportunity. And so for the most part, what I did there was just volunteer community service work, just to help out and get involved in the city or whatnot. So not at this point, because they're still closed borders partially, there's not much opportunity that I was aware of, but no doubt there's opportunity there. And then you take it even further. Another video I want to put is with a gentleman there who he's heavy in the black market. So I did a lot of, you know, studying of the black market there, because I had to, you know, make some late night deals myself. So just to give you, you know, since we're talking about Cuba, you know, like if you need to exchange currency and the cambio, the exchange is closed, which is, you know, there's certain places where you can go exchange euros or dollars. And so they're not very friendly to the dollar there. They put an extra tax on top of the regular exchange rate there. So that's something to keep in mind. So you don't want to go out there with dollars. You want to have euros or Canadian dollars, just because they kind of, you know, they don't want dollars because they don't want to deal with us directly in that manner. But anyway, so like it'd be late night. There was a time where late night I went down to, you know, through a back alley. It was dark in the alley. And the gentleman who I'm going to interview, you'll see in a day or two, he took me down a late alley. We knocked on the door, and it's a little small. And anybody, you know, I kind of grew up in the city of Detroit, so I'm not really afraid of environments like that. But most people wouldn't go. But you knock on the door, you know, the guy asks you how much money you need, and you exchange right there in the dark. And it's interesting. So but yet there's a black market there for everything. So everyone has a hustle there. Our infrastructure is rivaling Mexico with Amtrak trains being derailed. I didn't really see many trains. They have a train system, I think, but I didn't ride it or I didn't see it. So I didn't really see a train system. So they have taxis there. Them old 1930, 1940 cars, they're everywhere. The majority of the cars there are 1930, 1940. So that's real. But yet they keep them in good shape. So it's interesting to see. Then they have newer taxis, but they're more expensive. So it's in your best interest to take one of those old cars. And for just like we tweeted, like I tweeted the last show. Did anyone have or use gold and silver in the open markets there? I don't think they were aware of the monetary metals in the form of gold and silver. So I didn't have a conversation with anybody just because of appearance. I don't think there was any place that it actually sold coins or anything like that. So I don't think it's available for the public. And that's another thing there, because communication is very limited. Most people there, the younger generation, don't know monetary history. So it's good to say that they wouldn't find value in that, even though it would retain some purchasing power for them in the long run. But that's when America built stuff to last. Did you have to deal with government minders, people who are pro-government, I assume? A lot of people there were open. And so one of the things that they tell you not to do is don't talk about politics there, because you know, in the interview that I'm going to post, the gentleman talks about how the government's always listening. So you never know who's listening, who's, you know, probably going to tell on you or whatnot. And so Cubans, they know very well that they don't speak out loud, because there's penalties for speaking out loud or whatnot, such as jail time, taxation, you name it. You know, I'm not sure exactly how it goes. It says, yes, how visible were the police? And surprisingly or not, the policia they were all throughout the city, but yet they weren't, I didn't see many. You see a car every now and then, but that's one thing that is alarming, because if you're in an area that looks visibly unsafe, you imagine the police would be everywhere. But that's a different culture there, where the Cuban people, amongst themselves, they're really friendly. They're really a tight-knit family there, to where, of course, there's crime and whatnot, but most part, everyone knows everyone in their neighborhood. They stick together. And so it's a real close-knit community, where it's quite different than here in the U.S. So I don't think they have situations where police is needed, because most people can police themselves as far as keeping tabs on one another and helping one another out. So how is the real Cuban cigars? Tom Manley, the Cuban cigars, pretty solid. So I end up, there's a restriction on how many you can bring back. So tourists or Americans are only allowed to enter back into the country with 50. And anything above 50, you have to have some special documentation stating why, what, how, what not. So I kept mine below the 50 mark. But, you know, I'm not a real smoker, but I do enjoy a Cuban when I can get my hands on one. So which tax cuts do they think is the worst for the United States citizens, Ronald Reagan tax cuts or Donald Trump tax cuts? Didn't really get in detail, because I don't think they are fully aware of what happens here in the mainland, primarily because they don't really have television there. And so I'll talk more of it further in the next video. But, you know, they don't have TV, so it's not going to hear nothing about what happens in America. And so internet is very limited. So it's by design. So they don't know what's really happening in our country, other than the fact that U.S. Embassy was closed there. And because the U.S. Embassy is closed, a lot of people are pissed, because it basically will keep the Cuban people in from coming to America, because you have to have more money to be able to travel to to Colombia or Mexico. So you can no longer go to the embassy. So if you want to come visit family or friends in the United States of America, you have to go down south or out west, which is additional money, which most people can afford. So they're not going anywhere. Are they in the cryptocurrency? I don't think so, because they don't have internet like that. It'll be very hard for them to get involved with cryptocurrency, since the internet is not abundant and, you know, high speed like we have it here. So, but I'm sure there are people that are aware, but most of the people have no clue what cryptocurrency is, I imagine. What about alcohol, rum, beer, etc.? Is it expensive? Quality? The Cuban rum, I mean, the beverages there are top notch. I think that you know, the rum there and the cerveza or beer everything's done on the island. And so, to my knowledge, to my taste buds, the quality was probably superior, because there's probably less of the artificial things outside of what it takes to make, you know, beer and rum. But the Havana Club rum is top notch. It's top notch, and it's cheap too. I mean, it's cheap for a beer. Or they have let me see, it's Presidential, Cristal, 3 or 4 brands there, of which, you know, tastes fairly well. I'm not much of a beer drinker, but in comparison to what here, it's the same. But, you know, for a tall bottle, you paying 25 cents, 50 cents at best. So yeah, so the dollar converted to CUCs in the neighborhood, in the inner city itself, goes a long way. So yeah, so that's a little bit what's happening in Cuba. But just the cost of another thing is, you know, then I'll get into some inflation talk, but there's not much, there's no supermarkets. So all they have is little small, what they call mercados, which is little convenience stores set up in each neighborhood that, you know, everyone goes to get their toiletries, as well as another one stored next to it for your food and beverages and things like that. So it's different. Very, very, very different. So let's get into some inflation talk. I think I just missed a call, so I apologize if I missed your call. I'm not even connected the way I should be. So please give me a call back and we can chit chat a little bit more. But other than that, inflation, I want to hear some prices out there. I want to hear, if you guys want to share some stories as to how the pricing of things around the country might be up in your area. So, we have a proposed 25-cent tax to be passed on to gas consumers, which is all of us, which means gas prices is sure to go up. So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on, because most people, and especially heading to the summertime, you don't really want high gas prices. So that's going to be an issue for a lot of people. Next question, Ace One: are there still parts of the hurricane destruction still remain from last year? To be honest with you, from what my eyes saw, I believe the hurricane didn't really touch landfall in Cuba, because I didn't see any signs of it. I forgot to ask about it, but I didn't recall seeing anything. It looks, like a normal up and running country without any real damages from the hurricane last year. Unlike Puerto Rico, which is, I hear there's half the country still with power. It says, well, inflation is when you live in NYC and about 40 to 60% of your income is just on rent. Cannon Wilds, that is the truth. Actually, and there's another thing, Cannon, let me ask you a question. I was actually looking today online for hotels in New York. And so I'll taking a trip there pretty soon. So I was looking for hotels, and I noticed that there's beyond the actual cost of living in the hotel there, there's I think it says a property service tax. So my bill, I think it's $150 for rooms, but then there's another $150 for a property service tax. So what the hell is a property service tax is my question. So that in and of itself lets me know that you guys have been taxed up the wazoo. Do you think they're going to have inflation like how we had in the 70s? Tony B, that is a good question. I think it is inevitable. And so if you had a chance to watch that video I did earlier, when it talked about the great inflation of 1970s, as it gave a summary of how the whole inflation process started in the 70s, it all lined up like bit for bit according to what we're experiencing now, ultimately saying that monetary policy led to massive inflation. And so to my knowledge, I wasn't born in the 70s, but to my knowledge, the Great Society, and the Vietnam War, all that expenditures that was created in the late 60s, trickle right into the 70s to where it caught up to us and prices skyrocketed, unemployment was high. So basically there was a lot of market problems. And so right now it seems like that's a part of the business cycle. So it's just a matter of time before there's a market hiccup, massive unemployment. Then, like always, the government is not, they're not proactive, they're reactive. So at that point, they're going to come out with some type of, we need to keep the economy from falling. Let's borrow, and they're going to spike them, borrow. And then this last round of borrowing is going to come when the recession officially hits, will be the last time we get a chance to just borrow willy-nilly without any consequences, because at that point, when it does happen, there's going to be no limit that they're willing to borrow or print or monetize debt-wise to kind of keep things from just completely hyperinflating or just the market completely crashing. So they're going to, this last go round, in my opinion, is going to be a game changer, because China and Russia already got everything set up and ready to go. It's just a matter of, they need a catalyst, which will be some type of market correction here that's going to spiral around the world, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I think it's going to play. But yes, I think there's going to be some 1970s type of inflation, of which I read different articles saying that it was kind of, it was very troublesome for those that were not in a position monetarily or financially to make ends meet, because the cost of everything goes up. So which is worse, inflation or deflation? Well, for me and you, as consumers, deflation is always good, because that's basically saying prices are going down. So I would love to see the cost of living go down, drastically. But it's good to say that can never happen, because we're in a credit consumption society, which means that only way things can stay afloat is if more money is borrowed to pay off the old money. And so it has to be a continuous cycle, which means everything that central bankers do to prevent deflation. And so that's where stagflation comes into play. So when you combine inflation and deflation together, you get stagflation. I mean, some assets go up, then some areas go down. So right now, everyone knows that there's a housing bubble, there's a stock market bubble, there's a student loan bubble, there's an auto loan bubble, there's a consumer credit card bubble, there's a, you name it, there's a bubble. So those are all that, assets or liabilities that are continually increasing in nominal value, while on some ends you have and when there's competition, like in the cell phone industry, because you got Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile competing for each other, they're just lowering prices, which makes it good for us because we can get unlimited all that for $35 a month, which is good for us. But then it's not good if it trickles into other things such as housing, auto, things like that. That's not good because those are all people need to take out debt in order to sustain those things. So that's not good. Property taxes goes to new bike lanes and stupidity that the mayor comes up with, plus sanitation and other municipal services. But in New York, we are taxed heavily. Yeah, that's why, just so that property service tax is an additional tax to the people on top of, there's so many taxes people aren't really aware of. Like just first of all, when you work, you get taxed on your income. And then when you go to the grocery store, you get taxed on your purchases. And then based upon your savings, the difference between a savings and a real inflation rate is a tax. And so we are taxed unbelievably, because I think that what happened in the 70s led to Ronald Reagan being elected in the 1980s. Definitely true, Tony. I do agree. On a lighter note, did you get any opportunity to watch your Cuban guest dance? I did not, unfortunately. She's a contemporary dancer, and she's been very privileged to where she can come to the States. And actually, she's coming here, I think, New York. She's doing like a little tour pretty soon. And depending on where she's at, I'm going to go try her, see her dance. But I heard she's pretty good. China and Russia didn't have the institutions to complement civil confidence. Not sure. Complement civil confidence. Daniel, explain that a little bit more, please. Trump cutting food stamps in half for food box government cheese, just like Cuba. Yeah, and all the cuts that need to be made are going to hurt in and of themselves because, almost a third of the population or a fifth of the population is dependent upon government assistance. Like in Cuba, it's like 80, 90% are dependent upon government assistance. And so here in America, you cut that EBT card, boy, we're going to have a civil war for real. And it's unfortunate there's going to be inner city. It's going to be inner city as well as, in the suburbs as well, but more inner city people depend upon the government. And all they're going to do is just go outside to the suburbs. They're going to go to the suburbs looking for what they cannot find in the inner city. So Democratic states like New York and California seem to have higher tax rates. Very much so. But people, people prefer handouts still, thinking that it's actual handout. But it's not, because there's going to be some type of tax on the other end, such as just to touch base on that recent 25 cent tax that's going to be added on gas, possibly type of thing. People want cuts on their taxes, but then that money needs to be made up. So there's going to be another tax, which is the gas, and then that's just the beginning. There's going to be another tax, and so people don't really don't realize that the government and all our government entities, they're like a growing parasite. They can only survive upon their prey, which happens to be the people that put them in those positions to run and oversee the country. So it's unfortunate that our government is not going to be able to continue this much longer, because people are reaching the point of being tapped out. Lots of lead in the burbs. Lots of lead in the burbs. Very true. But more lead in the inner city. A lot more lead in the inner city. Unregistered lead in the inner city. I'm taxed 5 times before I see my money. A lot of people moving to NY, but they are leaving in for pride. They're living for pride. There's not much high-paying jobs. College kids live in 2 or 3 doors. Oh my goodness. New York City. I've go there. I've never been a true fan, just because I'm not used to just being packed into a city. But yeah, I'm not sure how people stay there for so long, because apart from being home for most people, if you want to have more disposable income, your ideal location will be Midwest or down south. But then again, jobs and things like that, that's all relative. So we have a caller. Let's see what we have here. Trying to answer the call on my phone. Gotta get this phone together. So if you're calling, I'm tapping my screen, but unfortunately, it's not going through. So try again if you can. May have a little technical issue on my end, but I'm swiping and the phone is not loading. So bad audio detected. The glitches of technology.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2. To hear the phone number, press 3.
Hello? Maybe not. So sorry about that. Try calling again. I'll try to work out these little kinks on my end. But other than that, I appreciate your calling. So try to call back and I'll try to do what I can. All in RTD interviews, you ask your guests to recommend what people can or should do to prepare themselves for the imminent crash. How would you answer your own question? How can you prepare? Tony, great question. Great question. So my thoughts is I was actually putting a lot of thought towards that because a lot of people say that you don't really present solutions. You don't present solutions, but you talk about the fact that you need to rethink the dollar, whatever that may mean, but yet you don't give solutions. And so my thoughts were, or my thoughts are rather, understanding just how things will shape out in the future. If you understand monetary history, you understand how, money in and of itself is precious metals, but yet we've been given substitutes, and those substitutes have actually enslaved us because it's made the cost of living go up incrementally, exponentially to the point where it's not sustainable. So the solution would be, it's kind of like a 4-part solution that I'm kind of playing with, but it has to do with your spirituality first, because, there's a lot of people out here that in the social media world, alternative media, that really, they make known all the problems and they more so shine light on the dangers, but they don't really talk about the fact that, if you're a believer in Christ and if you have some type of spiritual foundation, which I confess to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And also I love what I really grappled to towards the last couple of years of my life is just really understanding those red letters in the 4 Gospels and how Christ talks about the idea that, the kingdom of God. And so my mindset is a solution, and what I focus on is understanding the kingdom economy. And so if Christ is a savior of mankind, he is Lord, he is a king who reigns now and to come, if that's what you believe, then he mentions how his kingdom is already here. And a kingdom in and of itself is a government. And within that government lies all the things that we need, all the things that I need. So first I tell people, get your faith right. Understand that message there of, how the kingdom can work for you. And if you do that, it'll give you confidence because you know that you're not responsible for yourself. Christ is. He paid the price for my sins and he bought me basically and gave me new life. So that is my first point. So faith is the number 1 currency in my book. Second will be, once you understand, monetary history, who wouldn't decide to hold on to something tangible, something real. And only thing that's tangible and real that is outside of, for the most part, the financial system are things that actually come from the periodic table. And so, gold, silver, of course, but yet there's more wealth that's on the periodic table than we can all imagine. There's zinc, lead, all types of things that you may not be able to own physically yourself, but you can invest in them. And those things aren't going anywhere because everything we use, this camera, this mic, those are all byproducts of those substances there. So understanding the periodic table, understanding the metals will definitely be a good thing for you. And then right now it'd be hard to tell people not to expose themselves to this blockchain technology because our economy and our monetary system is transitioning into solely digital. Like we're partially, we're overwhelmingly digital now because everything we do has, some type of computer access to it, which means that only way you can truly draw some of your wealth out in paper form is by going to a bank or going online and checking your account or going on your phone. So we're already digital, but now, the next round, this blockchain is setting us up for the idea of going solely digital. And we're wanting it because a lot of people are excited about the blockchain, but I don't think the blockchain is by mistake, it's by design. So that's something that we're going to accept ultimately anyway. But yet, learning about the blockchain technology. If you learn about the blockchain technology, you'll know that that's the future. And if it is the future, it'll be worth your while to dip and dab in it with small amount of paper. And then the fourth one, of course, is to, get rid of your debt. Get rid of as much of your consumer debt as you can.
Extension 0 to accept, press 1. To send the voicemail, press 2. To hear the phone number, press 3.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having some issues with this phone. I got a new phone, and it's not going to work. So it looks like I may not be able to take calls tonight. So I'm sorry, because I'm swiping and nothing's happening. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but it doesn't look like it's going to work. So this phone is new, but it's not serving me well, so I probably won't use it much longer. So once again, I won't be able to take calls, obviously, just because it's not functioning properly. So apologize for that, but yet there's no RTD Live Talk if we can't talk. So I will try to iron that out eventually, but yet, so that's the third point of understanding the blockchain technology, because there are ways of getting some short-term gains, even though people say it's going to go to zero, which the blockchain is not going nowhere. A lot of the cryptocurrencies built on top of it might go to zero, but yet the technology is here to stay. And then the fourth one, as I mentioned, get out of debt and is try to be as self-sufficient as you can. And so for me personally, I believe in, of course, preparing ahead of time with the form of, food, water, just, having a little bit here and there, because most of us only know about going to the grocery store when we need something. And that won't always be the case. So it's always good just to have something at home. And, my wife wants me to learn how to farm and stuff like that and do gardening, but I haven't got to that point yet. And then also the last round would be with your Federal Reserve notes. They're still of use in the meantime. And even when things go wrong, in my opinion, people, that's not aware of monetary matters, they're going to still continue to look for and pursue paper. So having some paper, people will still take that in the meantime until, the hyperinflation type of thing really, really ramps up to people realize that it's the paper that's the problem, not, the cost of the goods. It's just the paper doesn't purchase as much. So basically faith, understanding the periodic table with metals. The third one is cryptocurrency, blockchain technology. Understand it for yourself. Don't depend upon nobody else. Do your own research. And the fourth one is to get out of debt and then use whatever paper you have to kind of explore it and to find ways to expand that paper through entrepreneurial ventures would be my recommendations of what I try to focus on. Appreciate it, Tony. I tried calling in, went to message. Yeah, it looks like, because my phone is acting up, calling in tonight may not be good because, the phone not, working properly. So I apologize for that. Joshua said, I raise rabbits and chickens. I will never go hungry. So I imagine you're probably not in the inner city. You're probably out in the countryside or, somewhere where it's easier and there's no codes or restrictions to doing that. I raise rabbits and chickens. I will never say debt too high, fake GDP numbers, high unemployment, inflation growing to hyperinflation soon. We'll want bonds. Who wants bonds? Yeah, and that's the thing. Like everything has been conventional. Everything that we were told to save and invest in, all those things have been brought into question right now because in the bond market, there's about to have an inverse yield curve. If that comes into being, that's basically all the bonds are belly up. And then interest rates going to have to go through the roof, which is going to stop this so-called recovery. And so if there's just one adjustment here or there by either fiscal policy or monetary policy, all hell is going to break loose. And people will not know why. They're going to look to blame whoever they can. And most people are going to blame Donald Trump, even though this was long before his watch. Yes, debt freedom is important. It says some economists say that negative interest rates will affect banks and the economy, causing it to crash. And they never mentioned that Japan has been a negative interest rate for more than 20 years now. Right. And I think the difference between Japan being negative and, anyone in or the United States going negative is the fact that the Japanese yen it's one of the primary currencies, but yet it's only it's a small part of the global basket. So not many people got yen in their possession. I don't think many people in Europe have yen as like they may be saving euros or saving dollars. So they can probably go negative a little longer because their demographic is very old. So even though they're printing yen up to wazoo, their people are saving that stuff. Seeing they're still saving those yen for their retirements, things like that, because they're older demographic. So as long as people are saving, ultimately in buying, real estate and whatnot to kind of absorb some of that liquidity, they can print all they want because people are going to save. So they can stay negative for a while, as they've been for several years now. So Japan's dependent on the dollar. So when U.S. wiggle, Japan will shift itself. Yeah, no doubt. Japan is already in the region where China and Russia got everything set up. So I believe that I'm not for sure, but I think Japan might be a part of that AAIB initiative already, and they probably already signed on for that yuan gold oil futures exchange stuff. So they probably already signed their name on the dotted line. What happens to the economy if 10-year bond goes to over 4%? If it goes over 4%, I believe that would just basically make all the prior bonds that's been issued over the last decade, since we've been basically zero interest rate policy, worth nothing. And so I mean people will require a lot more, a lot greater interest rates in order to continue on in this debt cycle. So a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. And that means that, our government is going to have to find ways of funding itself, which means they're going to have to issue more debt. And then if you already basically defaulted on those old bonds that, went for, 2.3%, 2 point whatever percent, they're not worth anything. So they're losing value if they're well below what the given rate is now. So it's going to be problems because no one's going to hold them, but who's going to take them? Fiat is a scam. Sorry, Japan. I do agree. See my question. Let me see, Bo. Let me go back up a little bit. Bo like a lion. I try calling with a message. Yeah, Bo, as I mentioned, because my phone is not working, can you speak about California pension crisis or similar issues and its effects on cost of living? Do you live in an area with big pension crisis? I'm, in the Detroit area. And so Detroit in and of itself defaulted on their on a lot of their responsibilities a couple of years ago. And it was big news around here, but it didn't really get much, attention. And I wasn't really focusing as much on, the monetary matters like I am now. But from what I do know, there are a lot of people who work for the city of Detroit that took pennies on a dollar. So I don't know the total number of people who got shafted, but it's good to say a good portion of the population who worked 30, 40 years in the city of Detroit, they didn't get the promise that they were told. And so when I say get the promise, they were told that they would get enough money to subsidize their lifestyle for the rest of their lives. And the promise was broken. And so that's just one example of a default. And so people end up getting something, but yet I'm sure they didn't get what they wanted. And so if they did not get the full 100%, monthly allotment of a pension, and if they got, 30, 40%, it's good to say it's not enough to live upon. So they're probably back in the workforce, or if they, took care of their prior earnings, that they probably are able to get by. But the idea that, the promise of getting fully compensated for the rest of your life, even at a smidgen of what you earned, is a Ponzi scheme. It's a scam. It's a way of it's worked so well because the pension concept it's an industrial age model. So it's right before the baby boomer generation, the grandparents, they're the ones that were promised that right after the Great Depression, the idea that, Social Security came into play. Now if you give us a piece of your income in the form of Social Security, that'll be enough to take care of you. If you are not, financially savvy enough to take care of, save money for yourself. So the Social Security led people into the idea of wanting pensions or just general retirement in and of itself. And so the pension aspect was supposed to be upon the employers. So all the heavy manufacturers, especially in my area, we got Ford, GM, Chrysler. And so that's, every person that's 50, 60 years old probably worked for a plant. And they're the ones that's they're getting paid now. But the thing is, it's not sustainable because the automotive industry is built upon credit. Nobody actually has a car they paid for, so they're financing it. So if the credit ceases, then that's going to be income that the manufacturers won't be able to receive. And then that means they're going to have to find some ways to make that money up. And they're also going to go back to the unions and look to make some cuts somewhere. And it's going to be in pensions. And then, of course, if you're not aware, familiar with just retirements in general, after the ERISA Act in 1974, that's when the idea of shifting responsibility from manufacturers and employers to the people came into play. And you can see how that's working because now I think the baby boomer generation, they're going to be the recipients of the retirement scheme where, you know, you set a certain amount aside out of your pay that's supposed to go into the bonds and the stock market and appreciate over time. And, you know, the next, you know, market hiccup, you know, some people say it's going to be a 70, 80% correction, whatever it is, whatever that correction is, it is not coming back. If the next stock market crash drops, we're at 25,000 points of the Dow. If that thing corrects to what some people say it will correct, which is 5, 6, 7, 8,000, that is the baby boomers' retirement. There's no recovering from that, because, you know, that money's say goodbye to it. And so at that point, you know, you have a lot of people entering retirement age right now, 65 to 70, that's going to be like, you know, man, my 2, 3, 4, 5, 600,000 that was supposed to be there that I'm supposed to draw off of, it went away in the market. And that's not going to be good for anybody. And then here's another question I want to ask you. I mean, not a question, but it's something that really troubles me, is the fact that we're told that, you know, especially nowadays for the younger generation, you're told that if you know, I remember there's a commercial from some company said, what's your number? You know, what number do you need to retire comfortably off of? And here's my thing is, how in the hell are you supposed to know what you need to be comfortable with for the rest of your life in a system where, you know, business cycles are in play to where markets go up, markets go down, and there's no guarantees in anything. So if I said, you know, I need to save $300,000 for retirement, what is $300,000 going to be worth if inflation, realistic inflation, is 12, 13%, and, you know, we're told it's 2%? That means that the stock market will never give me the gains I need. And then on top, if I'm dependent upon the stock market in and of itself, or any other type of funds, you know, will those companies be able to stay in complete operation to pay off their investors? And I don't think so. So the whole know your number, or what do you need to retire comfortably, that stuff is about to be questioned. It's about to be questioned. And a lot of people are going to be very upset. It says pension system is on its last legs and the UBI has to come. Yeah, Alan, the UBA, Universal Basic Allowance, it's already here. It's just going to be expanded. And what I mean by UBA, Social Security was the first installment in 1930 something, after the Great Depression. That was the first round of allowance to let them know that they can then promise us some form of compensation for the rest of our lives. And so the fact that we expect to get paid Social Security lets you know that people will accept Social Security or UBA. But I think what will happen is if there's massive unemployment, which usually follows after market corrections, that means that we can probably expect more job loss in this upcoming, you know, recession that will obviously turn into a depression. And then based upon how our government responds, you know, the only angle they really have to help people get back into the market or help supplement people until they're able to get back to the job force is to promise everybody something. Because people who the middle or upper class that have saved a little bit, half savings of some kind, they're going to be pissed if they themselves don't get some type of handout or some type of credit for being responsible, whereas in people who didn't take care of themselves get free money. And so there's going to be a lot of people probably not want to pay taxes if they not going to be able to get some of that money that they're going to pay in tax form that's going to go to the people who get the UBA. So I think they're going to roll out a new UBA system, Universal Basic Allowance, in the form of some that we can go on a limb and say probably like a blockchain type of allowance that everyone will have. And this is just me talking, of course, so take it for what it's worth, but this is all my opinion. There's going to be some type of digital wallet issued through the Treasury or the Fed, if people still want that around, or if the government is still able to get away with the idea of having a private central bank. But the Treasury, say, for example, might issue a digital wallet according to your Social Security number. So whatever your Social Security number is, you know, whatever you can, you know, that's your wallet address. And they'll deposit, you know, monthly into your UBA account. And then from your phone or from whatever, or, you know, that chip that everybody's talking about, you can just swipe, and you can then have access to your funds. So, and that's going to be a method to supposedly get us through. But then here's the thing. How do you get it to everybody and it not be inflationary? And that's not possible, because if you expand the monetary supply and you know, pass a budget bill saying for, you know, 10 trillion to hand out, $1,000, $10,000, $2,000, $1,000 to $2,000 a month per person or per adult in a household, price is going to go up. So they're going to have to increase that. And that's the same thing happening in Venezuela right now. Like, I follow that heavily, and in following that, the government they're always issuing an increase because there's no amount that's enough in a hyperinflationary environment. And so they 10% increase to teachers, 15% to the cops. So okay, but that people think, okay, 10% should get me by, but it only lasts about a month or maybe 2 months because the price of goods go up to compensate for that 10 to 15%. So stuff gets crazy. I can go on and on. So I'm gonna stop ranting. And it's be nasty. They're gonna get Social Security next. Oh yeah, Social Security was gonna go away because we're gonna get UBA. So because Social Security is already in the negative, so they can remove that liability or roll it over into the UBA, Universal Basic Allowance. OMBD, do you think so? Do you think we will get this year? I don't think it'll be this year. I think it'll be something that'll come after, because I think the Federal Reserve has a few more tricks up its sleeve as far as how they're going to respond when the next official recession is announced before it becomes a depression. Because like always, watch this. If you notice that everything, because we're the current reserve currency of the world, everything's going to start here. Just like in 2008, 2009, we had the, Lehman Brothers, AIG, all those companies went belly up. And then there was a company out in Europe that went belly up. And then we responded. QE, quantitative easing, 85 billion injected, 50 billion a month to, buy up all these bad assets, mortgage-backed securities and bonds and all that crap, which is still there. It didn't go nowhere. It's just on the Fed's balance sheet. And then once we kind of came up with some solutions on quantitative easing, long and behold, the European Union, they start. So the domino just tipped here, went to the EU, and then it went to Australia, and it went to China, and so everyone responded because the Federal Reserve note is the leading currency. So whatever happens is going to happen here first. We're going to respond. And then once we, a couple months, maybe a year, however long, put a Band-Aid on the situation as best we can, it's going to tip over and spew over to Europe because they're still QEing. So we stopped QE supposedly, but yet they're still doing QE at whatever per month, buying up everything in the EU. How are they going to unload that? So they can't stop QE over there. So, they're already in a bad situation because they're not even in position to prepare for the next domino that tips here and goes over that way. So that's just my thoughts. Yes. Monetary awareness. If you can't hold it, you don't own it. At the end of the day, when it comes to pensions and retirements, if you can't get access to it when you want it, how you want it, it's not yours. Yeah, Charles Schwab's had a commercial like that. I think it was the Charles Schwab's commercial. And they walk around, people got a little number above their head. I need 175,000. Oh, I need 300,000. How in the world can you know what you need when the governments around the world are printing massively? That number automatically is deflated. It's debased. It says, I live in California, and every major city has tent camps popping up. Interesting. Tent camps. I've seen a lot of articles on tent camps, and I haven't covered it yet, but I probably will tomorrow or look into it further. And so here in Michigan, it's not really talked about, but there's been more homelessness here as well. But that's just signs of people just being tapped out and on, down on their circumstances. I'll never say down on their luck because that's not luck at all. Thoughts on the Iraq dinar? Adrian Holmes. I'm not really familiar with the Iraq dinar, other than the fact that, last I really looked into it, Iraq was still not a stable environment. And so if they're using their own currency now, it's good to say that there's a lot of fluctuations in it, as well as a lot of speculation. So a lot of people are probably betting on it. So I know there's YouTubers out there that talk about how it'll be worth your while to collect Iraqi dinars, because when they reevaluate them or when they reissue whatever, they'll be buying back those old ones at a bargain price for those that saved them. But yet, once again, because they are aware of the fact that people are probably hoarding Iraqi dinars, expecting some type of revaluation, they're going to come out with a digital currency and not do anything with those dinars. Iraq has a war. The Shiites and the Sunnis and the Kurds are not one group. Yeah, I saw something about something about Iran. So I'm not sure if Iraq attacked Iran. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it, to be honest with you. Detroit is making a beautiful comeback. They got a new stadium down there. They got $1 million homes in Detroit and Sherwood Forest, but they don't tell the rest of the nation about that. Yeah, Detroit is going to be interesting because that area that you're referring to, Sherwood Forest, that area has a lot of nice houses, but I believe that a lot of those houses are for sale. So I haven't looked lately, but yet I know that a lot of those homes there, because the market, they can't get the amount of money they paid for them because they're not really worth that. So the price may be, so those are some big homes, and so price may be $400,000 or $500,000, but who's going to pay $400,000 or $500,000 to live in Sherwood Forest? I wouldn't. I mean, I would move out from there to pay and get more bang and get a newer house, because those houses are old as well. Says, see, Tony, question about U.S. gold holding. I think it's possible, good possibility that we have hidden gold in the ground. No doubt that there's gold in the ground, but yet how fast could we get to it if we needed to back something with it or put it on a table to show our allies that, we have real wealth? I think it'll take some time to get it out the ground. Yeah, and back to Detroit, the stadium downtown is good, but the people that's downtown now, they're not the majority. They're not the true demographic of Detroit. So that whole area development is meant to get the suburban wealth back into the city. And so the cost of living in that area is very expensive to where most people can't afford that. So that's going to be a problem, because how are they going to expand out? Who are they going to kick out? And then who's going to want to come down? So it's going to be a couple years, in my opinion, before people really feel safe enough to come back in, because as they expand downtown Detroit out, they'd have to go into the areas that's not livable right now. That means a lot of people are going to be pissed about getting kicked out of their house. So they're going to, probably get kicked out, but come right back, and then crime might go up even more so than what it is. What do we have here? It says people have student debt and cannot afford a mortgage as well. Very true. Buy crypto. I would say make sure you understand crypto before you buy it. Because here's the thing, we might experience, I think right now we're in the green as far as all of the cryptocurrencies, appreciate nominally, but yet at any minute now they could go back down in the red. And so if you're a late adapter into the sector, it's literally the equivalent of, gambling. You're hoping for gains while being subject to ups and downs, which is going to be nerve-wracking for a lot of people, because most people can't afford to get in the way they would like to. But yet having some skin in the game or having something would be worthwhile. But more so, it'd be probably more important to have a little bit of exposure to some of the projects. I think some of the projects are promising. There's a lot of good projects out there that people should look into that could be game changers in the financial world. That's what you want to pay attention to, because if they can save you money or make you money off lending directly to each other or storing and converting back and forth into currencies for the short term, that could be, save you money. I think at the end of the day, pretty soon people aren't going to want to put their money into the bank because you're guaranteed to lose out, but they'll be willing to put it into some form of a stable crypto, or into some form, put those notes or the Federal Reserve notes in linkage with some form of company that has a lot of promise on the back end. So that'll probably be the new savings pretty soon. So sorry to tell you guys, but stadiums don't employ people. True. I don't doubt it. Detroit needs high labor industries, not bread and circuses. Very true. But yet, here's the thing. Like right now, I don't think nothing's coming back into Detroit right away, because there's not a lot of people that can afford to buy things. And so right now, this gets back into the inflation conversation, but consumer prices are going down a little bit because people aren't, expending money. So companies are losing out. So if companies losing out, they're going to stop producing as much. And then there's going to be job losses in that sector. And then because our economy is built on consumption, we have too many malls. We have too many pop-up, shoe stores and eateries, especially, in the Metro Detroit area. We have every corner is turned into some type of pizza, burger, bar. you know, and that stuff, and that stuff not cheap. So eventually people gonna stop going there. People stop going there, then, you know, who's gonna buy that stuff? Not many people. Then I mean they're gonna close. So it's gonna be vacant buildings and a lot of unemployed people. Because pretty much people are gonna realize that we already have more than we need. And that's another advantage of being in Cuba, where, you know, people don't have, you know, multiple pairs of shoes. You know, they're happy there. But, you know, here we need, or most people like, you know, having the latest shoes because it's at our fingertips. You can order it online. You know, Amazon is taking over the game and they make things, you know, cheaper. You have Walmart. So all those stores, you know, are going to have some problems because people aren't going to be able to buy that stuff as much as, at least, you know, as much as they used to in the past as well. RTD, I hope you are distilling. Detroiters need to distill to get rid of that lead. I do distill. And I actually have a pretty good one I got for my birthday. And I actually ran a test on it. I got, you know, bottled water, faucet water, tap water, distilled water, and some other water. And I did little water samples. And, you know, the tap water was yellow with the drops. And then the bottled water was light blue. And then the other bottle was another green. But then my distilled water was blue. And it tests for various things like lead, all that stuff like that. But I was surprised that, you know, bottled water wasn't all that pure. And then tap water was yellow. And I'm like, you know, if you can taste your water, if you can taste something in your water, something's wrong. Detroit needs factories. Yeah, Detroit has factories. There's more factories, you know, from yesteryear still up and not running, but still there. And what I was told and what I've, you know, saw from some other YouTubers a while back was that most of those factories, the manufacturing based, all those plants, a lot of those plants, especially in Detroit, have already been purchased by the Chinese. And so I believe, and, you know, give you an idea of where I'm going with this. You know how we have here, everything is made in China. And so everything here is made in China, but that's not going to be sustainable much longer if we're not able to afford those goods and services, or those goods rather. And so in the next economy that's coming, you know how China has all those empty cities. And so the next system looks like this, in my opinion. A lot of the countryside in China who are savers already, they're going to come into those empty cities. And there's cities like New York, Detroit, Chicago already there, up and running, already built, just empty. All the countryside is going to go into those empty cities. And then those people are going to begin purchasing products that's going to say made in the USA on their shelves, because the Chinese are going to employ US citizens in our own warehouses to build products to then sell to the Chinese at dirt prices. And so we will get back to manufacturing here in the States, but it's not going to be on our own terms. And it's not going to be for the type of money that most people are used to working for. And so the days, you know, in the economy ahead, the days of, you know, demanding $20 an hour to put together a bike or put together a car or whatever at the low end, those jobs aren't going to be there, because the Chinese are not, they're not known for compensating their workers heavily. And so that means that they're not going to compensate their workers or the U.S. citizens heavily either. So whatever we're experiencing now with all this flood of made in China for the last, since NAFTA really took off in the early 90s, you know, everything has been made in China. We've been living high off the hogs with all this technology from China. The shoe is going to be on the other foot. All the U.S. companies are going to come back, but we're going to do it for the purpose of sending those goods to China. And then we're going to be, you know, living off of whatever we get from them. They're going to be living in those new cities and living good and living and having fun, but off of our backs here. And so we're going to have a booming economy, all right. But there's going to be a booming economy where we're going to be the producers for China. They're going to be living in our lifestyle now. And so that means all the getting used to having houses that are, you know, more than we need. We're going to be conducive to just having what we need, because, you know, as my prior guest Jim Willie always talks about, you know, when the new issuance of currency comes out, it's going to be devalued in order to make the goods sent to China cheaper. So, you know, like we have the yuan, I believe the exchange ratio It's like 6 yuan or something to 1. What that equates to is, for them to do things in their country, they can't pay that much. They can't pay that much for their workers because that'll just cost too much. And then to be able to send it over here, it just wouldn't work. So say on the other hand, if the new dollar or new whatever note is issued, the exchange ratio is going to be something like a 8 or 9 or 10 when we're no longer the reserve currency solely, or we have that domestic dollar or domestic note, as Jim Willie likes to say. That note or issue of currency, whatever it might be, digital or paper, is going to be in exchange for the yuan or whatever the global currency or basket of currency is at that time. It's going to be like 10 to 1, which means the same thing's going to happen here. They can't afford to pay us $10, $20, $30 an hour when the exchange ratio of selling our goods to China is going to be so costly. So they're going to have to give us crumbs so that the people in China can buy it in abundance like we do now. So, no, that's kind of tricky, but I hope that makes sense. Says nobody's ready for a market crash either. I believe it. How is the economy in Detroit? I want to buy a home there. So, there's the inner city of Detroit, and then there's, suburbs. So when people say Detroit, Detroit, the population has dropped drastically. Detroit used to be, I want to say, about 1 million strong 10, 15 years ago. But to my knowledge now, I haven't checked, but it's like 200,000, 300,000. And so what used to be enough housing for, I think, 1 million people is now, cut in half. So there's probably more than enough properties that you can buy. But to be truthful with you, there's more empty lots than there probably are houses, because of when as the people left the city of Detroit, crime came through, drug infestation came through. It wiped out everything to where there's more abandoned houses because majority of the people in Detroit don't own their homes. And what I've learned is that people who don't own anything, they don't appreciate or know how to take care of anything. So they tend to let the houses go to tank. And that means that's why you see, pictures and videos of all these abandoned houses with fire burned houses. Those are everywhere. Those are everywhere. So basically, if you want a house, sure, you can come buy a burnt up house for $50, in a bad neighborhood that, you can hold that property until afterwards. But, it's not much, worthwhile opportunity in Detroit, I think. Not now, but buying the land is important. It says, what we got here? It says, that's right. Tony, that's right. I think India will sell to China. We are screwed. Yes. I think supposedly China and India have some issues, but in the next economy or the next monetary system that's coming, I think they'll work out their differences. On top of that, Indians are savers, and they have more precious metals in their possession than any population on the earth, any demographic on the earth. So there's, and I think they probably live longer. So you have a lot of senior citizens sitting on, ounces of gold, and all that's going to be reevaluated. And it's just a matter of not whether the government allows the people to actually enjoy some of that wealth that they're holding on to. But it's good to say that any government that's been suppressing the people for 20, 30 years, they're not going to just freely give up reins and let people get back their liberty. Government admitted they have no jurisdiction over crypto today. Eric Zimmerman, I didn't see that. I'm not aware of that, other than that press conference from the SEC and CFTC, which sound like they were very favorable for now. Would Detroit be better to be green again? Green as in plants? Actually, yeah. I'm familiar with a neighborhood not too far from where I grew up at, that someone, I think a company, an industrial company in that area, purchased, like literally purchased 4 or 5 half blocks. There was just straight blocks. There used to be streets, and they gutted all those houses, and they, turn the soil, and they grow crops on that little 4 or 5 blocks. And when you drive by off the service drive, you see corn and, whatever else they can grow in our conditions. But, people are allowed to go and pick what they want. And so that's just one community where, they grow every year. I haven't went that way and picked anything, but it's there. It says, I got a lot of faith in Detroit because remember when nobody wouldn't even want to go downtown. Now, if you get a lot downtown, you can pay at $1,500. Don't know. I haven't looked into the market downtown other than knowing that, because they're building so much, the price is going up. The bomb bubble has burst. The economy is in the emergency room. Doesn't look good. I do agree. Just the fact that there's so much question on that, the inversion of the exchange or the rates rather for the 30-year and the short-term bonds being so close together. That's recessionary type talk. Clearly a lot of people have talked about that, but whenever the yields of those two 30-year difference in bonds come together, that's trouble. They love downtown. The internet saying $1,000 to live downtown. That's a lot of money. $1,000 to live downtown. And other than casinos and the Pistons and Red Wings and Tigers and all that stuff, ain't much really happening down there, to my knowledge. What do you think of the banks not liking lending to one another? Good one, Sandra. Good question. I think here's the thing. Like, when it comes to the banks lending amongst each other in this environment where a lot of people are not borrowing as much, there's no real way of making a profit. So to lend to your partner, and he may not be able to get any gains on that loan, you better off just keeping it for yourself and trying to, figure out a way to, of course, tax on more fees and more transaction fees and late fees and all those type of fees to earn money without having to part ways with your capital. So it's going to be a lot of in-house stuff now, which is a problem. And so Arnie Bowen said a credit freeze, first sign of an imminent free fall. Yeah. So basically that's a sign that I believe that credit is drying up and not many people are willing to let go of their capital because, the whole idea that, banks need to be capitalized for the next recession and they pass the stress test. And so, of course, all that's biased because the Federal Reserve can't give an honest audit or honest assessment of their own shareholders. And so, of course, they're going to say that everything's fine. And that's the thing. Most people don't even know that the too big to fail banks are actually shareholders or investors in the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve has an obligation to make sure that too big to fail banks are always good. No trust, they'll get paid back. Yeah, from taxation. Will China become new world currency? Not sure. I'm not sure if they want that responsibility just yet because they don't really need it. Because I believe their gold reserves are so strong and so long, any solution that's presented in that next economy or the next system is going to be a monetary-based economy where people are going to want something tangible. They want to get back to the old days, and every government knows that China's sitting on more than they tell, as well as China. And so they don't necessarily have to have the reserve currency other than to say that whatever currency is out there, just say the word, we can back it by gold. We can back the yuan. They can print as much yuan as they want. And they are doing that now for their own internal problems. But in that next system, they can easily say, 1 ounce of gold is worth 600 or 6,000 yuan. And then right then and there, they can, those tons and tons of gold can be reevaluated in the form of, basically monetizing all that paper with metal to where everybody who's sitting on some paper can exchange for gold and confidence to be rebuilt and they'll be fine. Whereas here in the U.S., like most people say, there's no gold for Knox, there's no gold in the Federal Reserve Bank that belongs to the United States of America. Then at that point, we can't say we can back every dollar that's in existence because there's more dollars than we even know of. So, if they did back every single note or digit ever created, as Jim Rickard said, it'll be $50,000, $60,000 per ounce. And then that means there's a small percentage that actually have gold. Those people will come out very well on the other end, and they don't want that. Says the mainstream media is talking exactly like 2006, 2007, 2008. Very true. They're talking just like that, and it's not by coincidence. Says skills are always in demand. Very true. Says as to why cryptos are here. Do you think the U.S. has more gold than the world thinks? Good question, Tony. I don't think we have as much gold as the world thinks. I think in the Federal Reserve lands that's blocked off and is protected by the government, they're obviously protecting it for some reason other than natural preservation. So it's good to say that we have enough minerals and wealth in those Federal Reserve lands to bring into circulation, in the next system to make it so that we're not all the way a third world country, but there will be a droppage in our standard of living, which will take us from first world or leading the world to probably second world. And second world is going to be just a condensed version of our lifestyles now, where it's be a little less eating out, maybe one car, 2 cars per household, not 3, 4, 5. All the malls and all that stuff like that. People are not going to be shopping like that. And that'll be more second world, if that's, a word I can use. But the idea of going to third world, I'm not sure about that. I mean, we're too, we're too big of a nation to go completely third world. But any shock to the economy is going to be an adjustment where people are going to, experience some change anyway. We have very little left. Hey, RT, how are you? I'm doing good, Robert. Thanks for joining us. So how long before the inflation becomes obvious? I believe that, good question. I believe if you're watching this channel, you're aware of, what's happening monetarily. You already know inflation exists. And you already know that the digits and numbers given to us by the Census Bureau is already fabricated. So those, the 2.1% in January to get this, it has everybody all spooked is, not the real numbers. That's just what their measuring tools has told them. But anybody, if you measure according to the way John Williams or Shadow Stats measures, according to the pre-Reagan era level of inflation, it's good to say if you add in gas and housing, all the things that's excluded, we will be, closer to probably 10%. And so if you actually, if you guys, want to find out more about just a true inflation rate, a prior guest, Ed Bunkowski, who's hedge fund guy / money manager, he has an actual website. So if you go to the RTD University, look for Ed Bunkowski, Butowski rather, and there's a link there to his index where you can see the actual rate of inflations in major cities around the country. And I want to say, it actually measures according to the way it was measured in 1980, 79, adding all those true price indicators into it. And we're closer 9, 10, 11. And I think California is like 12, 13, as far as, just a true housing, food, toiletries, things that, people actually use on a daily basis. Those are the things we need to measure. And according to that study there, as well as John Williams, we're, already closer to 10. And so because it's not mainstream news, it's not spooking a lot of people. And because people don't know that, it's inflation, they just think it's just, they think it's greedy capitalists, that's raising prices. But yet they're just businesses trying to stay alive, which means you're going to have to raise your prices if you're being taxed, or you got to pay your employees more than they're actually producing. There's no doubt you're going to raise the price. Always want to be there, says filming in the BC. So how long before the inflation? Says you're doing another great show. Tony, appreciate you, my friend. Dave, yeah, Shadow Stats, John Williams. I haven't had him on the RTD yet, but I will try to get him on. Only got in late 2016. Boom. Interesting. So, yeah, it looks like we've been chit-chatting now for over an hour. And so what I would like to do format-wise is to keep it to an hour or under so that I can try to, hopefully do one every night and get my technology together so people can call in and actually share their thoughts. But probably about to sign off for tonight. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and definitely checking this out. And so I wanted to get a little bit more in depth into inflation, but I think a lot of people want to know about the Cuba trip or whatnot. So definitely, if you have a chance, you can go down there and experience it for yourself. And in doing so, it'll only help you further appreciate how blessed you are now. And so other than that, about to sign off. What else? I want anything I'm forgetting? I'm not sure, but as of now, that's all that comes to mind. So be on the lookout for, more news on inflation. And then that's going to be a problem because the Federal Reserve, as the video I did earlier, the Federal Reserve is under a lot of pressure right now. We got a new Fed chairman who no one knows much about other than the fact that he's going to be and do anything he can to keep this system going. And he might have some tricks up his sleeve to stave off this next recession or the official announcement of the recession for as long as he can. And so in doing so, that means you're going to have to play with some numbers, and they're going to do all that Fed speech and forward guidance and all that stuff to keep this thing going. So other than that, anyway, everybody, I appreciate you guys for joining us. Have a good evening, and let's chit chat again. And tomorrow I'll try to get another video on telecommunications of Cuba to you guys so you can actually see what I mean by things there in Cuba. So other than that, QE4 will probably go directly to that UBA. I can imagine that trick being QE4 is going to be some form of allowance to the people. They got, like people say, helicopter money. They're going to go right to the public. I mean, that makes the most sense because you can't go to the banks again because they've already been bailed out once. So you're going to go directly to the people. Then the people are going to go spend, and then people that spend, they're going to deposit into the banks, and the banks will get some liquidity, and they'll be able to lend. So that might be a solution to kind of, you know, keep things in the works on the short term. But no, Joshua, Tony, man, appreciate you guys for checking in. Alan, appreciate you checking in. Sorry about the technical issues, but I'll work that out for next time. And other than that, guys, just as always, you know, if you can, give me a thumbs up. If you enjoy this, if this conversation is informative and helpful, share it so people can find out what's going on. And as always, I'll try to bring you more important and relevant news for you guys to continue to educate yourselves and learn. And other than that, I like my little 4 solutions. Get your faith right. Periodic table. Understand what the real wealth is on a periodic table. 3rd one, get education in the crypto industry because that's going to be big. Then 4th, get out of debt, and as well as to utilize whatever savings you can in the short term because paper is going to spin before it inflates away, I believe. So other than that, let me know, comment actually after this. Let me know those 4 thoughts. If anything you would take out or add. And of course, I saw some people say that they're atheists, they don't believe. And so it takes an atheist to believe that you don't believe. You know what I'm saying? So you believe that you don't believe. That's faith, but it'd be worthwhile to put your faith into something that is bigger and greater. That's something that gives you hope. And me in and of myself, I don't have any real true hope in myself because I only got so much knowledge, but I believe Christ can do it all. So once again, my favorite piece of scripture, I'm gonna sign off with that, is Matthew 6:33. And it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the things you need will be added unto you. And so I believe that in all of this confusion, God is still going to do some great things in the lives of those who have faith and are expecting to receive from him. And so I'm going to be one of those people. So hopefully you are too. But that's it for me preaching tonight. I need to get that off my chest. So thank you. Enjoy your night, and I will see you later.